Hi everyone, Taylor with the Beta Angel Project here. Recently I've seen a few videos as well as some write-ups come across a different type of grip to use when you're climbing. And I wanted to touch on that a little bit. This is going to be a very specific, focused discussion. It's on a single research paper that was done back in 2021, and we'll go over what that research paper found. To make a long story short, the grip in question is one where you end up putting a significant amount of force through the very tip of the finger, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means in just a moment. So, paper we're going to look at is called, and I don't mean to scaremonger here, I'll caveat the heck out of this in just a moment, unusual rupture of the middle finger flexor digitorum superficialis tendon in a climber, a biomechanical analysis by Casso, Vigoro, Valerio, Monsaber, and Legre. And this was in the Journal of Hand Surgery and Rehabilitation, 2021 paper. And like I said, I don't want to scaremonger. The rupture occurred as a result of a grip that I'm not going to be talking about a whole lot. That grip was called the hook grip, and what that was essentially this was a very interesting hold that was that they put force through, and it was primarily through force in the middle part of the finger, and that's not what we're going to be talking about today. But when the authors of this paper looked at this, they also wanted to model several other types of grips as well in order to compare it with this hook grip. So what we're going to be talking about is, first off, forces, both absolute forces as well as tendon forces, through four different types of grips, but we'll focus on three of those. The three we're going to focus on are the half crimp. So if this is my palm is the edge, half crimp has got a little bit of hyper extension through what's called the dip joint right here, this joint right at the edge. And then we've got a fair amount of flexion going on right here at the pip joint, okay? And then they also looked at the slope grip, sloper grip. And then they also looked at what they call the nail grip. And so I won't use any of the other terms that are floating around the internet right now. This was called the nail grip of the paper. Basically, think of the nail of the nail bed as being perpendicular with the hold, and force goes directly down through kind of like that nail tip. Um, let's go ahead and get into this. The two tendons of interest. I know this is about the flexor digitorum superficialis. Let's call that the FDS, and that can be contrasted with something called the FDP, which is the other flexor tendon within the fingers. And so the FDP inserts here, right at the distal edge of the finger, right at the edge. And then the FDS inserts here in the middle part of the finger. And so remember, the FDS is the one that ruptured in this case. And so the authors are basically going to show how the crimp grip and the sloper grip are distinct from the hook grip and the nail grip in terms of the amount of force that are being applied to specific tendons. So let's go ahead and get into this. I am not going to be able to show you the paper. There is an open source version. I will make sure you guys have a link in the YouTube video, but I can't necessarily show this on the screen due to licensing issues. So let's go ahead and get into this. They looked at force as well as the estimated forces on the tendons. And so how did they do this? They brought in an elite climber who climbs around 14C, and they wanted to make sure that the climber could handle the excessive loads in strange grip types. And so they figured, hey, this guy's adapted fairly well. Let's use this individual. And so what they then did is they took forces from the different grips as well as the angles of the different joints, and then estimated tendon forces from that. So now, it wasn't perfect. They didn't necessarily grab any information about pulleys. Okay, models are intentionally simple. This one was relatively simple model. So let's look at grip force first. Exactly what has been mentioned in some other videos, as well as what one might expect. Compared with the crimp grip, force was negative 19.4% with the slope grip, as well as negative 42% with the nail grip. It was a lot higher with the hook grip, but that's kind of expected when you're just kind of grabbing almost like a jug. Um, so what that basically means is that in the crimp grip, there's a fair amount of force, sloper grip a little bit less, and then a fair amount less in that nail grip. Now, so you can't necessarily transfer a ton of force into that grip, and as somebody who's used this grip, it's kind of an uncomfortable grip. So now let's go ahead and look at the forces on the tendons, or the estimated forces on the tendons. And what they found was that, and I'll read another quote here, FDS tendon force ranged from 172.2 newtons for the crimp grip to 878.2 newtons for the hook grip. Remember, we're not as concerned about the hook grip. Um, it was respectively 95% and 116% higher with slope and the nail grip. So that's the FDS tendon we're talking about. The FDS tendon force essentially went from the crimp grip was at a certain level, and then sloper grip a little higher, and then with the nail grip, it goes even higher than that. Now with the crimp grip and the sloper grip, the r- like the force pushed through the tendons is not the same, so they're not at parity. But there is a meaningful amount of force in both the used in both the FDP and the FDS tendons in both the crimp and the slope force. A little bit more in the crimp grip for the FDP and a little bit more in the slope grip for the FDS. Now, once you go past those, okay, to the nail grip, the FDP force, according to the model, just drops off a cliff, and there's not a whole lot there whatsoever. The amount of force that goes through the FDS, on the other hand, is about the same amount as the FDP in the crimp grip. And remember, I said the crimp grip had a little bit more of the FDP force than the FDS. So basically, you're distributing load between the two different types of flexor tendons in the crimp and the slope grip, but in the nail grip, you're not distributing that force according to this paper. It's primarily going through just the FDS. So let's go ahead and I'm going to mention two more quotes by the authors. This suggests that the nail grip is very specific, giving rise to poor performance. So remember, the force was pretty low, which probably explains why it is not used by climbers except for micro holds where only the fingertip can exert force, such as a very tiny force where you kind of have to pull over and try to dig in a little bit more. Now, what do they recommend? They do have a recommendation in situations where there is no choice, and they were primarily saying this about the hook grip, but it may or may not also apply to the nail grip. Climbers should be advised to actuate the whole finger, including the tip, so as to actuate the FDP tendon. This artificial co-contraction could help the FDS tendon to balance the hip joint. Here to make any claims as to whether or not this is accurate or not. I'm just sort of going ahead and giving out some resources and sources so you can take this. And if I were you and you were determined to use this grip, I would take this paper. I would give it to a strength and conditioning specialist, maybe a doctor of physiotherapy who kind of crosses both the S&C world as well as the medical world, and see if they can help you to load this safely. Uh, that's it for tonight. I wasn't going to talk a ton about whether or not there's a huge performance benefit to this. I have used it myself in the past. It's uncomfortable, but it did seem, at least for me, there was a reason I used it on this specific grip, so I could put more burns in my project. At this point, I would, that was in my youth, I wouldn't recommend it necessarily. I would want to go ahead and take my own advice and learn how to load it carefully if I were ever going to use this again. I currently don't train it. Thanks again for listening. Hope this was educational for you. Like I said, I'll leave a link in the YouTube comments, and go ahead and like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it to support the work. Comments on whether or not you've ever used this script are appreciated, or questions about the paper. Like I said, you can go ahead and check out the paper yourself if you'd like. Have a great night.